Hello, welcome to Black Talk, a social media news show that brings news and opinions about the Black global community to the internet. I'm your co-host Trina Goldwell and I am joined by co-host Jeff Persons.
So Stephen A. Smith recently delivered this incredibly powerful monologue, laying out what he sees as a true life-or-death crisis facing the Black community. And believe me, he did not pull any punches. So let's break down exactly what he said, piece by piece.
He kicks the whole thing off with this one, raw, provocative question. See, he's not talking about some abstract debate on gun control. He is zeroing in on the violence happening within the community, and he's demanding to know who exactly is responsible. This question, right here, is the launch pad for his entire argument.
And right away, he connects that question to this number, 1.9 million. That's how many people are currently incarcerated in the United States. What he's arguing is that this internal violence is directly feeding a system of mass incarceration that's basically primed and waiting to swallow up members of his community.
Okay, so this brings us to the first big piece of his argument. He's saying the primary problem isn't just an external threat. He's framing this as an urgent internal crisis, one that absolutely has to be addressed from within. And, to really drive this point home, Smith lays out these staggering numbers. We're talking about thousands of state prisons, federal prisons, local jails, and then he asks this really pointed question. Who the hell do you think they're building it for? In his view, this is a massive system built with his community squarely in its sights. All right, so this all builds up to what's really the central tension in his whole monologue. It's this clash between acknowledging history and demanding accountability in the here and now. He draws a really sharp line in the sand.
Okay, so let's get into the core of his logic here. He is emphatic. He's not denying the reality of systemic racism or America's long history of criminalizing Black people. But then he makes a hard pivot. He argues that all of that history becomes, in his words, completely irrelevant at the exact moment one person chooses to shoot another person in their own community. For him, you just can't use one to excuse the other.
Now, it's really important to understand, Smith isn't making this argument in a vacuum. He's making it crystal clear that this internal crisis is happening while, at the exact same time, the community is facing these huge escalating threats from the outside.
And where does he point? Straight to the Supreme Court. He lists off a series of massive rulings, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, looser gun restrictions, the end of affirmative action, and bolstering religious rights for businesses. Smith doesn't see these as isolated events. He frames them as a coordinated attack, a dismantling of protections that have been in place for decades.
And for him, this isn't just abstract legal theory. The consequences are real. He highlights that 26 states now allow people to carry concealed weapons without a permit. He's directly linking this to the court's decisions, basically saying you've got more guns flooding the streets right at the exact moment other protections are being stripped away.
So, Smith asks a big question. What's next on the chopping block? And he points his finger directly at DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. He sees this as the very next battleground.
Here's his prediction. He believes the very same legal tool used to take down affirmative action, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, is now going to be turned against private companies. And the argument they'll make, according to him, is that these DEI programs are themselves a form of discrimination. It's like using a civil rights law to undo a civil rights initiative.
Okay, so all of this brings us to what Smith sees as a really critical vulnerability for the community, something he calls a crisis of consistency. And he argues this is what's making it so hard to fight back effectively against all those external threats we just talked about.
To make his point, Smith sets up this really powerful comparison. First, he asks a question. When a police officer or any other outsider kills a Black person, what is the community's reaction? The answer? Uproar. And he's quick to add, rightfully so. He is not questioning it. He's saying that response is completely justified, it's necessary, and it's powerful.
But then he flips the script. He asks the much, much tougher question. What's the response when the violence is internal, when we kill our own?
His answer is just one word, and it's devastating. Silence. And it's that contrast, right? The massive uproar for one and the deafening silence for the other that he believes is causing so much damage.
So why does this matter so much? Well, according to Smith, this perceived inconsistency is what gives opponents an opening. It allows them to question the authenticity of the entire argument, to suggest that Black Lives Matter only seems to apply when the person responsible isn't Black. This, he says, dilutes the potency of their whole fight for justice.
But look, Smith doesn't just leave it there. He's not just criticizing. The entire second half of his monologue is really this passionate call to action, and it's all focused on unity and self-accountability as the only path forward.
So what's he asking for? Well, it's pretty clear. First, break the silence on internal violence. Second, you gotta uplift, galvanize, and inspire each other. And this one is crucial. Hold your own community members accountable. He hammers this point home. This isn't about being right-wing or left-wing. This is about life and death.
And really, at the absolute heart of his plea is a simple, powerful idea. When you're facing attacks from the outside and decay from the inside, his argument is that the only real resource you have is each other. Survival itself, he's saying, depends on valuing every single one of those lives. And so he concludes by just leaving this question hanging in the air. After he's laid out everything, the violence, the prisons, the political attacks, he turns the question right back to his community, and really, to all of us. When are we going to deal with that?